Well, here we are. It is that time of year. It is the best weekend of football all year round. It is the divisional round of the playoffs in the NFL, and we're here to talk about it on Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. Welcome in, everybody. This is Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. I am your host, Ed Smith, and with me today we have David Street
What's up, y'all?
and we have Thaddeus Lloyd.
Hello.
Well, guys, it was the wild card weekend last weekend where we went from 44% of the teams in the NFL being in the playoffs down to 12 and a half. So, as we get into this weekend, if I could ask y'all a question before we move into the divisional playoff, uh, what is the one big takeaway that you have from the wild card round, Thaddeus?
One big takeaway for me is the NFL is a professional league, and it doesn't matter how big of a line, people think this team's going to win by much. It's never expected. It's never going to go how you expect it to go. So it's just unpredictable. That's what I got from this weekend.
David, what'd you get?
My big takeaway is that the losers lost big. There was only one game from that weekend that was decided by single digits, and that was the Bucks Redskins game. Every other game was decided by at least 10 points. So there really wasn't much competition from Wild Card Weekend, guys.
Yeah, and my big takeaway from the weekend is that there were some teams that got put in the playoffs that really show that they do have a ways to go before they can really compete with the elite of the elite in this league, and they got exposed and across the board. To your point, David, it was just such a wide chasm between the winners and the losers this week. That's just, to me, exposing those teams that weren't quite ready to be this deep into the playoffs. Even though one of them had 14 wins, they weren't ready for this. So that's our takeaways on that. And then as we move into the divisional round, we are going to be picking these games. And Thaddeus, we picked last week's game. What kind of result did we have on those?
So Matt and I had the same record. We evened it out at 3-3. We picked what seemed like some obvious winners. We all three of us picked the Bills to win, and all of us picked the Eagles to win those games. However, we came up short on a couple surprises. That mainly all of us got wrong. The Chargers winning. We all thought the Chargers were going to win that game. But Matt and I went 3-3, but Ed had a fantastic week. He went 5-1, with the only one being that Chargers loss.
Well, just carrying over from the regular season, I guess. That's all I can say about that part of it. But as we get into this week, we're just going to go by the kickoff time of these games. And the first game that is up on the docket is going to be Saturday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. It is the Houston Texans going to Kansas City for the team that really hasn't played it since Christmas, the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, their in their history, these two teams have played only twice in the playoffs, and both of them were wins by Kansas City. David, what do you think is going to happen in this game?
Well, I think this is probably going to be a a defensive battle. I and I say that knowing how Patrick Mahomes performs in the playoffs, and just like last year, and really pretty much every playoffs he's been in, he's probably going to have a great postseason again. But just overall, when I look at this matchup, I know the Chiefs are heavily favored, but I gotta tell you guys, I, I am not impressed by this Chiefs team whatsoever. Okay, I don't care that they won 15 games. In all my years of watching professional football, I don't think I've seen a more pathetic and more fraudulent 15-win team than the Kansas City Chiefs. You know that they won 15 games and only had a plus 59 point differential. How do you win 15 games and don't even have a point differential of at least 100? I mean, call me salty, call me sour grapes. I don't care. Surely you have to realize how utterly sad and pathetic that is, right? And I've seen people say that like, oh well, it's the fact that they're still winning is impressive, and the fact that they're still winning despite going deep into the playoffs every year is impressive. Okay, I don't want to hear it. So what? You know who else went deep into the playoffs every year? The New England Patriots, right? When they won all those Super Bowls. And at one point, they went to 4 or 5 Super Bowls in a row. Never did those Patriots teams look this lethargic, look this pathetic. Okay. So it's just something I want to get out of the way. This Chiefs team does not impress me whatsoever, but that's just me yelling at a cloud.
Thaddeus, do you have any retort to that?
Um, yes, there have been some teams with really good records, but they're a little shaky going in the playoffs. And it depends which kind of team you look at it, because this also kind of happened last year. The Chiefs, got off to a slow start. They didn't have a great offense last year, and we were like, oh, the Chiefs don't look that good. Yet they still make it to the playoffs. I believe last year they made it as the third seed. And they still won all their playoff games due to defense and culture. Now, what I was actually surprised by that point differential, because you would think, being the one seed, 15 wins, they should have easily a plus 100 point differential, but only being 59. 59 is they're only winning by just over 3 points a game. That's how crazy this season has been, and it really feels like every single game they've only won by at least 3 points. However, the past month of December, they picked it up a little bit more. They've gotten bigger wins, so who knows if it was an indication of the future going forward. But they might seem a little fraudulent, but this is still championship DNA. They're looking for that three-peat, first ever to do it in NFL history, and they're going to be really motivated by that. The only thing you see with really good teams who win a lot, the only thing that stops them is themselves, because they get bored. They get bored with winning. But I really do think they're motivated this year, especially more than last year, to get that three-peat.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more thing. Like, the one part about the Chiefs team that I don't think is fraudulent is their defense. I think Kansas City has a top 3, top 5 defense in the league, right? But just overall as a unit, I just don't think you can catch that many lucky breaks in a season. Like, when you catch that many lucky breaks a season, eventually it catches up to you. But we'll see what happens.
I would definitely say that it can catch up to them, especially with Houston's defense being the number one team in takeaways in the NFL. If there is any bright shining light that would turn things in Houston's favor in this game, that would be it. Because if they can turn Patrick Mahomes over, who has been, a little nicked up, let's be honest. Plus, there's the rust versus rest conversation to be had with this Chiefs team, because I think they were playing people in the third row of the stands in the last game versus having anybody of any consequence on the field. So that is where that conversation can kick into place. Have they been resting too long to have any kind of continuity on the field during this playoff game. We have seen an emergence of the wide receivers getting a little bit better with DeAndre Hopkins. Since they picked up DeAndre Hopkins, who would love nothing more than to stick it to the Texans after his departure from Houston a few years ago when he went to Arizona first. So I definitely would have that conversation of Kansas City's offense. They they will need some continuity and how quickly they can get it into gear. That'll be the determining factor for this game because the Texans are so good on the defensive side of the ball with their head coach DeMeco Ryans being the guy that he is. That is a huge chess match between the offensive mind of Andy Reid and how well that that offense can execute versus the disruptive nature of DeMarco Ryan's defense. So I'm definitely looking at a little closer game than this 8-point spread that uh, Vegas has on this game. It is going to be outdoors at Arrowhead or GEHA or GEHA or whatever you want to call it. 26 degrees, middle of the day, going to be great football weather. And this is that historically is the temperature in which the running game is most effective. So you're going to see Mixon and you're going to see Kareem Hunt. That matchup does play a lot into what the success will be in this game. But looking at all these factors, uh, David, do you have a sense of where you think this game is going to land?
Well, where I think this game is going to land, like, are you asking for a score prediction?
A prediction and score.
Oh, okay, that's what I thought. Even with all that crap that I just talked about the Chiefs, I still can't pick against them. Not yet, at least. Okay, their time of doom will come, but not yet, at least. But I think Houston's defense is going to hold up very well. So I'm going to take the Chiefs 24-17.
Okay, and that is where do you see this?
Yeah, it's it's. I think it's going to be a real defensive battle, um, especially in the cold. Um, yeah, I'm also going to take the Chiefs. It's just really hard to to bet against them, especially the last couple of years. I'm going to be taking the Chiefs in a pretty low scoring game. Um, I would I believe I would I would take the under on this. Um, give me the Chiefs 17-13.
And I'm I'm right there with you guys. Thaddeus, we're going to be a little closer on that. I'm taking the Chiefs. I'm taking it at a score of 19-12. There's going to be some awkwardness in the how this scoring takes place. So that'll that's why I'm taking such a odd score there. Now, as that game is winding down, we will see the primetime game be Jalen Daniels, who is ready from primetime, against the Detroit Lions in Detroit, the first number one seed to play in the playoffs this year. Commanders versus Lions. I would prefer to call them the Redskins, like David did a little bit earlier, but that's just what they are at this point. If we're going to take a historical look at it, the Redskins are 3-0 against the Lions in the playoffs all time, with only one game being beyond the wild card round, and that was the 1991 season played in January of 92, the NFC Championship game. That was the Mark Rippon led Washington Redskins against the Barry Sanders led Detroit Lions.
Probably
So
the most probably the most dominant NFL team of all time that nobody ever talks about.
I don't disagree with you. That team was a buzz saw, and I watched it with my own eyes. Because y'all weren't really a thought in anybody's eye.
Yeah, that was 3 years before I was born. Well, 2.5 years technically.
Yeah, that's why do you? Yes, I'm making myself feel old. That's fine. Um, but Thaddeus, um, when will we see the Detroit injuries finally start to add up and you know basically you know not go against them at some point?
Yeah, that's a good question because once those injuries started piling up during the middle of the season for the Lions, their defensive numbers started tanking really hard. They started going bottom of the league. They were one of the worst defenses in the second half of the season. And it really showed. And then the last time it showed was against the 49ers. Brock Purdy was just, as a 49ers fan, Brock Purdy was dicing them up in the first half. They settled down in the second half. But then they came out with this really great defensive performance against the Vikings, and you're like, okay, are these are these injuries not, affecting them at all? And that could be the case, but it also could be said, look what happened to the Vikings when they played the Rams yesterday, or a couple days ago. So who knows what's really going on with that defense? Their defensive coordinator is shown to be a solid coordinator. I believe. Oh, Aaron Glenn. I believe he's also interviewed for some head coaching jobs.
Yes.
So I really don't know what to expect out of this Lions defense. They did get Alex Anzalone back, which was one of their big pieces on defense. So it should be better than what it was through like weeks 13 through 16. It should be better, but it's not quite as what it was the first 8 weeks where they were just, dominating the opponent. So I am expecting a little bit more points to be put up. The Jaden Daniels might have a field day against this defense. He did a good job against a pretty stingy Bucks defense, who was playing hurt last week. So I do expect to be some points to be put up against this defense.
Yeah, and the pickup of Zadarius Smith has paid dividends for Detroit. Just trying to plug in some pieces to get the ball rolling again after people keep getting carted off the field. So I'll ask you, David, since you obviously watched the Tampa Bay game last week and you watched Jaden Daniels and Washington with their defense. Can they be as disruptive against the Lions as they were against Tampa Bay?
Well, I don't know if disruptive would be the word that I used because that defense hardly generated any pressure against Mayfield. I think the offense more or less shot themselves in the foot. But to answer your question, Ed, I don't think I don't think this defense stands a chance against the Lions offense. Even with veteran guys like Bobby Wagner and like Marshawn Lattimore, as a unit overall, this is still a very much inexperienced team going against a Lions team that has been improving every single year, including in the playoffs. So no, even with their best efforts, I don't think they stand a chance against Detroit's offense because you got to deal with the likes of Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown. You have to deal with their two-headed monster running back and Jameer Gibbs and David Montgomery. I mean, do we honestly, realistically think that the Redskins defense stands a chance against a Lions offense that was the highest scoring team in the league and one of the highest scoring teams in NFL history? Because I don't think they stand a chance.
I tend to agree with you, and it's more because of their rush defense than anything else. Because at this point, the Washington is 27th in the league and giving up 135 yards a game on the ground by itself. And we're talking Jameer Gibbs, and we're hearing words of David Montgomery being available We're waiting to see if that's truly going to come to fruition at this point. So you get that two-headed monster against that porous of a run defense. I don't care what Jaden Daniels does from sun up to sundown. He's not going to be able to do that much against Detroit when there's very little time left for him on the clock for him to do it. Make no mistake about it. Detroit is a team that is all about draining the clock and scoring points at the end of every drive. That's what their formula is. They've done it all season, and that is why they have a 75% chance of winning this, according to the analytics. It is a 9.5 point spread. Supposed the total is at 55.5. I'm taking Detroit in this game. I think it will be a little closer than what we're going to see on that point spread. So I'm going to take this 31-27 just because Jaden Daniels by himself will account for 2 touchdowns. He's got to have the help around him to try and keep up with Detroit's scoring opportunities out there.
I'm gonna take I'm gonna take the Lions 38-21. I don't think it's gonna be close. And by the way, just real briefly, can we talk about how crazy it is that the Lions have the highest scoring offense in the league, and yet not only is Jared Goff not in the MVP talks, it's never even been mentioned. You know, when you talk about guys in the MVP race, Lamar Jackson, Saquon Barkley, Josh Allen, and yet the guy who led the best scoring offense in the league isn't even being discussed as an MVP candidate. And I think that just says more about how loaded and built the Lions offense is. But it's still pretty crazy to me.
Complimentary football, 100%. And that is Dan Campbell's style for sure. Thaddeus?
Yeah, I'm also gonna be taking the Lions here as well. But I agree with Ed. It's gonna be. I think it's gonna be pretty close. Jaden Daniels, for some reason, just has this magic that's been going on where he's made these games really close, and he's been excellent in the fourth quarter. So I do expect it to be a really tight one. I've got the Lions winning this one, 35 to 28. But to your point, David, about Jared Goff not being in the MVP, I think he was for a couple weeks, but then he threw 5 interceptions against the Texans. They still won the game.
Yeah,
But
that definitely hurt him.
I remember he threw that, and I was like, "Oh man, he's out of the MVP race."
After
Coaching?
2 weeks where he hit, what, 20 some odd throws in a row?
Yeah, yeah.
But of course, when your tight end Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown are completely open, it's it's a little
Yeah.
easier to do that.
That I think it's interesting that both of you guys think that this is going to be a close game, and I think it's going to be 17 point victory, and I think 17 is being generous. I could see the Lions easily winning by at least 30 or 35. Like I don't think this game is going to be close whatsoever.
I think it's the difference between one a a head coach and Dan Campbell that hasn't blown anybody out in the playoffs versus Dan Quinn, whose coaching pedigree is keeping things close and trying to strike with it 1 or 2 plays to get over the hump. So that combination of things, I think, is part of what's weighing my score prediction on this. And that is, I'm guessing the same as for you, but do you have a different reason?
I just think it's the NFL, and it's generally going to be closer than what people think. And number one seeds, actually, even though they do have the number one seed, generally aren't that successful. So that those are just the reasons why it's a, like I said before, it's a professional league. You never know what's going to happen. I mean, I could still see a blowout. Like the Lions have it in them to blow them out. They had the biggest point differential this season, but it's the playoffs. Things are a lot tighter, and they just don't go the way that they normally did in the regular season.
Fair points.
for sure. Now, and that's going to close out Saturday. When we get into Sunday afternoon, we'll see the first game of the day where the Rams, who are coming off such an emotional win, having to move their wild card game to Arizona to play in Minnesota, and really just, for lack of a better term, dominated that game from start to finish. And they are going to wind up going to Philadelphia in a game that is going to be 40 degrees, cloudy, with that fan base. It's just a weird and hard place to play in the playoffs. So the Rams, Eagles, historically, once again, they have played 3 times in the playoffs. The first time being in 1949 in the NFL championship. So since the Super Bowl era began, they have played twice. Once in the wild card round in 1989, and then the NFC Championship game in 2002. And I think those of us that remember that game have a very fond memory of that game. That was the 29-24 game that St. Louis won on that one. So, uh, Thaddeus, after such an emotional win in the wild card round, can this Rams team keep going and keep operating as efficiently as it did and have the emotional stamina to keep it up in Philadelphia?
Yeah, I really think they do. No, being, watching the Rams, and the Rams Niners has been a big thing. And this Rams team, everyone talks, how the Niners are a veteran team, the Rams are also a veteran team. They won the Super Bowl 3 years ago, and some of those players are still on there. Matthew Stafford is still on that roster, and he has played great playoff football since he's been with the Rams, and he has just been this great veteran presence for him. And the Rams defense is made up of a lot of young, hungry players, but they're all really talented. As you saw in the game against the Vikings, like they were just going after that Vikings offensive line, and they really couldn't do anything to stop them. And Sam Darnold was seeing ghosts 2.0 again, and it was a really good showing for him. And I really think they can continue that success because Sean McVay, as we know, is a top 5 coach in the NFL, and they've got this defense together. Of course, you'd miss Aaron Donald, future Hall of Famer, but they've picked up Jared Verse, and they've haven't missed much, I'd say, when comparing the two as far as pass rush goes. So I do think they'll continue this momentum, and it'll be an exciting game. I can guarantee it. This season, these two did play together. The Eagles won that contest 37-20. This is going to be a lot closer. This is going to be a lot closer. Like I said before, this is the NFL. Games aren't going to go how you think they're going to go. I mean, I think it's going to go this way, but I'm right, you're wrong. Um, that's how it goes. But this game is going to be close, and we're going to see who has more metal, the Eagles or the Rams, and it's going to be intense.
Yeah, for sure. And David, let me ask you about the Eagles side here for a second. Uh, with some of the antics that we saw with AJ Brown on the sidelines during the Packers game, the lack of targets for him and Devontae Smith, at what point do you see some of these personalities that are I'm the man, type wide receivers? When does that start to boil over because they're not getting the targets that they want, even though we all understand that this is a running football team that uses a wide receiver to take pressure off the running game?
Well, Ed, unless I'm misunderstanding you, I didn't know that reading a book counted as antics.
I've never seen any player be reading a self-help book while on the sidelines during the middle of a playoff game when you should be completely focused on the task at hand.
Yeah, no, that's a that's a fair point. And listen, I think the Eagles are who they are, and I think they embrace who they are. And for all the criticisms that Nick Sirianni has rightfully deserved, okay, they have taken on the identity of him, and you're seeing that on the field. Now, as far as the game, how the game's going to go, and I know we're not in predictions yet, but we're just about to get there. So is it all right if I just go ahead and give my
Go ahead.
prediction?
Go ahead.
Thanks. So this might come as a shock to you guys, but I'm actually going to pick the Rams over the Eagles. And the reason why I'm going to take the Rams over the Eagles, it's the exact same reason why I took the Rams over the Vikings. I trust Matthew Stafford more in the playoffs than I trust Jalen Hurts, just like how I trusted him more, Matthew Stafford more, than I did Sam Darnold. Okay? Jalen Hurts in passing situations, I do not trust him whatsoever. All right? And I know people are going to say, like, well, he didn't really need to do anything because he had Saquon Barkley. Well, that excuse doesn't really work when you realize the fact that Lamar Jackson had Derrick freaking Henry and he still put up his best passing season of all time. To me, with the very little workload that the Eagles gave Jalen Hurts in on the passing side of things, it's very obvious that they don't trust him as a passer, and so I'm not going to trust him either, and that's why I'm going to take the Rams in an upset over the Eagles, 28-21.
Yeah, and to expand on that point, I trust Sean McVay as a head coach over Nick Sirianni as a head coach. So far, it just feels like the coordinators have been running the the offense and defense for the Eagles with superior talented players, and they've been up to the number one team in the NFL, by power ranking standpoint. But when we're talking about the playoffs, power rankings don't matter. It is coaching, it's the details that type of coaching is needed to be buttoned up to get through this tournament. And I certainly trust Sean McVay way more than I trust Nick Sirianni. Because if there's any kind of infighting, Sean McVay is like a shark in the water. He is going to smell it and he's going to attack it. And considering how well the Rams defense held up against the run of the Vikings, which led to all those sacks on Sam Darnold, I expect that same type of intensity into this week. But Thaddeus, is there any chance that you would think the Eagles overcome uh, some of the, shall we say, short, uh, the short sightedness of the OCs running this team versus a head coach that has already won a Super Bowl?
Yeah, I do think, like you said before, that the Eagles have been one of the top talented teams in the NFL. They're in the power rankings. Not only are they talented, but their coordinators are excellent. Now we know we can blame Nick Sirianni for some of the things that have happened, the weird relationship Jalen Hurts has with his receivers, but these coordinators are very legit. Obviously, the defensive coordinator. Forgot what his name is.
Vic Fangio, I
Vic
think.
Fangio. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
He's been a proven coordinator. Now he had to get the defense together from the beginning of the season, but since the middle of the season, this defense is incredible. Like they are legitimately a top five defense now under his watch. And then of course you have Kellen Moore on the offensive side, who's always, you know, been known as the creative kind of type. Well, what's great with this season for him is he's developed his offense, which was more of a spread him out, passing kind of thing, to he's built his offense to the strengths of this team, which is a run your throat down, run the ball down your throat kind of team. And that's exactly what's happened. He's used Barkley, one of the best backs in the game, with maybe the best or the second best offensive line in the Eagles, and they've completely dominated every single game that they've played pretty much. So I do expect this to be close, like I said before, because the Rams are going to put up a fight. I do trust Sean McVay more than Nick Sirianni, but I just think the coordinators and the Eagles' talent will be too much to overcome for the Rams, and they the Rams might have learned a little bit from their last meeting, but I just still think this Eagles team is just too good to overcome. So I'm gonna take the Eagles another close game on Wild Card Weekend. I'm gonna take them 27-20.
I don't think I don't think I have ever seen a more criticized coach, one who has won at least 14 games in 2 of 3 seasons. But listen, all right, I'm not here to tell you that Nick Sirianni is a great coach or a great head coach. I don't think he is. I just think he's great at hiring the right coordinators.
So much so that he got rid of both of them last season and brought in both Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore or Shovelface this year.
Yeah, and I guess supposedly that wasn't even Sirianni's decision, if I remember correctly. Wasn't that a case where management came to Sirianni and said to him, "Hey, you better hire these guys right now"?
I think it was your team collapsed underneath you, so you've got to either leave or is it somebody else's fault? And he said it was somebody else's fault, so he made
Yeah,
them leave.
yeah.
So, but for me, this is being heralded as a 6-point game. Uh, Philly has a Philly is favored by 6 points. Analytics say 65% chance of win. Like I said before, it's going to be 48 degrees, which lends itself to the running game. And this is one of the best running teams in football, bar none. As far as yards per game, they're almost at 180 yards a game on the ground. That is phenomenal. And as good as the Rams' defensive line looked against the Vikings, this is a totally different animal. I am going to take the Eagles in this simply because I don't trust that the Rams are going to have enough in that wide receiver room to balance out how much the Eagles defense is coming after Matt Stafford. Yes, they've got Puka Nakua. They've got Cooper Kupp. They've got Jordan Whittington. They've got all these, scat guys, if you will, but not the true number one receiver. And those scat guys can only do so much, in my opinion. So I am going to take the proven commodity of the Eagles' offensive line. And if there is a 4th and 1 or a 4th and goal somewhere along there, you know that the Eagles are going to get it. And that is just going to tip the scales in the Eagles' favor. I, I'm with you, Thaddeus. I think it is going to be a tighter game. It's not going to be a blowout. It is going to be just over that 6-point spread. So I've got this sitting at 27-20. Now, if the 3 games that we have talked about so far were an undercard, if you will, here we are at the main event. Sunday night, 6:30 Eastern, we have 2 heavyweights getting into the ring, and this is going to be a knockdown, drag out match in the coldest weather city in the NFL, and that is the Baltimore Ravens going to Buffalo to play the Buffalo Bills. Historically, they've only met one other time, and that in the playoffs, and that was the divisional round just 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I should say. Excuse me, where the Ravens won 17-3. And I'll just, Thaddeus, what are your thoughts going into this matchup?
I'm very excited for this one. We got two of some of the best quarterbacks in the game. We got Lamar Jackson, one of the greatest running quarterbacks of all time, and we got Josh Allen, one of the most physically gifted quarterbacks of all time. It's going to be it should be really fun. However, there might be, like you said, it's one of the coldest places in the NFL. It's going to be raining and snowing all weekend in Buffalo, so the weather might play a factor in this game. Excuse me, but so this is really going to come down to the run game. Like I said, I do think Lamar Jackson is the greatest running quarterback ever. And Josh Allen is not terribly too far behind him either. He's also really good at running the ball himself. And then, of course, you have two really good backs. You have 30-year-old Derrick Henry still doing Derrick Henry things. And you have James Cook, an emerging running back for the Bills, who's really complemented with this season with Josh Allen for that run game, and he's been really solid for them as well. So I think this is going to be a real just run the ball kind of game. Yeah, it'll be fun, probably more for the defensive minded people, who like the defensive slugfest. But it's not going to be defensive. It's only going to be slow because teams are just going to try to run this thing. So that's what I think is going to happen for this game. Just a lot of running.
Yeah, both of these teams are game shrinkers. So that in and of itself, it becomes a war of attrition, whether it be just through time of possession, uh, keeping the other offense off the field, however you want to call it, however you want to explain it. Both of these teams want to shorten the game and just tilt it in their favor. Well, this is definitely a game that becomes the immovable object against the irresistible force. So I'll ask you, David, can Todd Monken keep this defense humming the way that it has been against Josh Allen and this offense?
Yeah, I think he definitely can because listen, we've seen how good an offensive coordinator Todd Monken is. Different level of the sport, but still the same concept. But we saw that the only time that Georgia won national championships in the Kirby Smart era was when Todd Monken was there. And then he goes to the Ravens offense and he completely revamps that unit. So we've seen how good of an offensive coordinator he is, and I just don't see why that should change, especially against a Bills defense that definitely does have ballers. But we've definitely seen better Bills defenses in the past.
Yeah, and I have definitely seen on the defensive side of the ball, the Ravens have gotten better as the temperature's gotten colder. Which, by the way, it's going to be 16 degrees in Orchard Park when this game kicks off.
Well, and you know what's interesting? The Ravens defense has kind of been uh, Jekyll and Hyde, whereas they were the best defense against the run, but on the flip side of things, they were one of the worst pass defenses. They were 31st in passing yards given up. So great against the run, not so great against the pass.
For sure. And with that being said, Thaddeus, do you think James Cook can break through against this defense for Baltimore and give some balance to the Buffalo offense?
That's a tall task because there's a reason why the Ravens were the number one rush defense this season. So it's going to be very tough for him. I'm not expecting a huge game, like over 100 yards, probably between the 60 to 80 range, I would guess, but it'd be on something like 17 carries. So it'd be very hard, and it's it's going to be a bit of a slugfest, like I said before, when it comes to that.
On the flip side, Thaddeus, what are your expectations of Derrick Henry on the ground in this game, being that I he has not played Buffalo in Orchard Park during the playoffs.
It's it's going to be interesting, but he is King Henry, and we might see another stiff arm to the third dimension again, like what happened with poor Josh Norman all those years ago. Um, I do expect another big game out of him. They played the Steelers last week, supposedly. Now they were falling a little bit off, but Steelers had one of the best defenses, and he just totally outran them because of the threat of Lamar Jackson. So I'm expecting another big game from him.
Okay. And David, when you look at both of these offenses, their passing game seems to be centered right now around the tight ends. Uh, which team do you think has a advantage in that part of the passing game?
Oh, Ravens easily. I mean, you're talking about Mark Andrews, a guy who I believe is a top three tight end in the NFL. Hell, I'm probably going to tip. I probably think he's the. I think you can even say he's the second best tight end in the NFL behind, of course, Travis Kelsey. So I think this is just one of those things where you have to go with the obvious answer here. And to me, the obvious answer is Mark Andrews.
I'm not going to say that that's all too obvious. Uh, I think the combination of Dawson Knox and Kincaid are just a dynamic duo, keeping everything in the center of the field and can play as a flex tight end maybe a little better than Mark Andrews, in my opinion. So I think that is an interesting dynamic there. Which tight end gets going? Is it the 1-2 punch of the Bills tight ends, or is it Mark Andrews basically resurrecting his career from 10 years ago, uh, just because it's the playoffs? Because I don't remember any point during the season where I thought Mark Andrews was a uh, superior weapon for the Ravens offense. But all of a sudden, here we are at the turn of the calendar, and he's suddenly 2016 Mark Andrews again. So I think that's an interesting turn.
Well, I think it's easy to forget a guy like Mark Andrews when the Ravens have Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. And so when you have those two guys, it's easy to forget, right? But make no mistake, Mark Andrews is an absolute game changer. And you're a fool if you're not game planning against him as a defensive coordinator.
Agreed. Agreed. Um, there is talk of Zay Flowers coming back for the Ravens in this game. Do you think that changes anything as far as how the Ravens are able to take some pressure off the running game, David?
I think it does change things quite a bit, actually. I mean, what did I say before? That even with Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson still had his best passing season of all time, and one of the best passing seasons ever. He was the first quarterback to ever toss for at least 40 touchdowns and throw only four interceptions. And it's really kind of amazing when you think about it because, and it's not always the case, but a lot of the times when you have teams with dominant running backs like Derrick Henry, usually you see that team being just very, very run heavy to the point where the passing game is kind of irrelevant. And that's what we're seeing with the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think even I thought in the beginning of the season, I thought that Lamar Jackson was going to take a bit of a step back because of Derrick Henry. Well, now with Derrick Henry, he's become the best passer he's ever been. And I think it's easy to see why, because when you have teams focusing on Derrick Henry, right, that takes the pressure off of Lamar Jackson as far as running goes, and he can focus on being more of a passer. So all that to answer your question.
Yeah. And when we get down into these coin flip type games like this, we start looking at all aspects of these teams, including the special teams, the kicking game. And right now, we're seeing Baltimore be ranked 29th in percentage made versus uh, Buffalo being at 18th. So it may just be as small of a margin as that. Right now, Vegas has this game at 1 point between the two, so a real pick 'em game between the two. So, Thaddeus, where do you see this game coming in at?
Oh gosh, this is a tough one because again, these are two of the best teams with two of the best quarterbacks. Interesting defenses. I I actually I almost have no no clue what's going to happen. We got the Chiefs got so lucky because they have to play the Texans, who still might have a chance to upset them, but they're nowhere near the caliber as either of these two teams. So the Chiefs are like, hey, if presumably if the Chiefs win, they're like, hey, we only have to play one of these two teams. So I really don't know where this one's gonna land. I think the like both of these quarterbacks have had playoff heartbreaking losses. Um, but finally, I think we might have Lamar Jackson going to the AFC Championship again. Um, I I slightly trust the Ravens defense a little bit more than the Bills defense right now. So give me the Ravens in this one in sort of a low scoring affair, but give me the Ravens 23-20. It might be up to a kick and well, look what happened last time that happened.
David?
I'm gonna take the Ravens over the Bills, 28-17. I think the game is going to be a lot closer than the score indicates. I don't think it's going to be a dominant 28-7 victory. I think it's going to be a game where it's close. It's very tightly contested through the first 3.5 quarters, and then the Ravens score a last-minute touchdown on a Derrick Henry run. So I'm going to take the Ravens 28-17. How about you, Ed?
I think that the MVP of the league is going to take their offense, hunk it on their shoulders, and carry their team to victory. Now, which one of these quarterbacks is going to be the MVP of the league? I think it's Josh Allen. Give me the Bills. I'm
Hmm.
going to take the Bills 20-19 because I think the Buffalo Bills defense will stop a 2 point conversion as the game is nearing its end to uh, to escape with the victory. Give me the Bills over the Ravens. Let's go to the AFC Championship game.
And I tell you what, I think both of these teams believe that the Chiefs are going to beat the Texans and go to the AFC Championship. So with that in mind, just think about the motivation that both these teams have, against the Chiefs, right? The Bills feels like they lose to the Chiefs every year they meet in the playoffs, and then of course, the Ravens losing to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship last year. So there's definitely going to be a lot of motivation here for both of these teams.
Agreed. Agreed. And that's all what's going on the field. There's some news and notes of the NFL that uh, we just want to touch on real quick. Uh, that the Cowboy Circus has come to town. We must all talk about the Cowboys because that's what Jerry Jones wants us all to talk about.
Hey, hold up! I got something perfect for that. I
And
think
that
that's the first time we've ever used a sound effect on the show.
I love it. Love it. Uh, there doesn't seem to be a plan in Dallas right now with how this organization is going to go forward. Because just to go through the timeline, last week, the Cowboys blocked Mike McCarthy from interviewing for the Chicago Bears job, but then turns around this week and they part ways with Mike McCarthy. Why? Why? Thaddeus, can you see any possible reason why that Jerry Jones would do this and keep Mike McCarthy from taking another job when, in the end, he's not going to keep him anyway?
Thaddeus, before you answer that real quick, are we sure it's not simply the case of Mike McCarthy walking away and Jerry Jones' ego being so freaking big that to make himself not look bad, he has to say, "Oh, I got rid of him. I got rid of him."
Yeah, I don't know what's going on when he did that to Mike McCarthy, but what I do know is there is going to be an announcement a week from today saying that Jerry Jones is the new head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Um, but but in all seriousness, it was just kind of a almost like a jerk move kind of thing. Like, why wouldn't you let him, if you were going to fire him, like, why wouldn't you just let him go, interview for where he wanted to interview? So it's all very bizarre. I don't know what Jerry Jones is doing. He doesn't know what he's doing. It's just a very not great situation which has been going on with the Cowboys starting from the beginning of this year when or last year when he said, I'm all in, and yeah, it has not happened. Um, if he says that again this year, I'm still not going to believe him.
Hmm.
All
So,
in the nut house.
Yeah.
oh,
Well, I don't.
yes.
David, do you think part of this uh, turn of events of letting Mike McCarthy go uh, has to do with him talking to a certain college coach?
Well, that could be part of it, but before we get there, I don't know why we're acting surprised when this is the same Jerry Jones who ran Jimmy Johnson, the best coach that franchise has ever had. This is the same Jerry Jones who ran him out of town. And why did he run him out of town? Because he couldn't stand the fact that Jimmy Johnson did not kiss his ass, right? And as far as Deion Sanders goes, I don't see that marriage happening whatsoever because I think Jerry Jones is going to go for a big name, but he's not going to go for a name that's even bigger than him. And he is not going to want to hire someone who will steal the spotlight from him. I think Deion Sanders, and we all know you're obviously talking about Deion Sanders, Ed. I think Deion Sanders would be an absolute disaster in Dallas. And that wouldn't necessarily be his fault. I think it just says more so about how much of a freaking clown show Jerry's world is.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'm not ready to say that Deion Sanders is ready for NFL coaching. Uh, head coaching duties, but he is being talked to by the Raiders and some others. I think he's got such a good thing going on at Colorado. He should stay there. But when does Deion Sanders do anything that Deion Sanders didn't agree to? So that's where that goes. But a point of clarification: Jimmy Johnson is the best head coach of Jerry Jones's tenure of the Cowboys, because as far as overall, the Cowboys, I'm not sure they will ever have a head coach better than Tom Landry.
Okay,
Uh,
that's a fair point.
so I just wanted to clear the air on that one.
But I
Before
do,
we start
but I
making
do,
an assumption.
I do think though that Jimmy Johnson certainly had the potential to be the best coach in that franchise's history if Jerry Jones didn't have an ego the size of the sun.
Agreed, agreed. And it was all about who got credit for those Super Bowls. Uh, but going from who's been the best head coach in that franchise's history, who do we think is going to be the next head coach in that franchise's history? Thaddeus?
Who's going to be the next great head coach for him? I don't know. It's
Well,
it's
well,
not it's not in the future. It's not gonna be when if Jerry Jones is running the team. Maybe if Stephen Jones is running it, but as of now, Jerry's just been kind of over his head on it. He's still hanging on to the '90s, and he just needs to retire. That's just what it should be.
well, like I said before, okay, it's going to be a big name, or at least a big enough name, but a name that will not steal the spotlight from Jerry Jones. And guys, I'm definitely throwing a wild card out here. I'm probably crazy for even thinking this, but Mike Tomlin, Mike Tomlin to the Cowboys. He's
Oh,
sort of a big name, not a name big enough to take the attention away from Jerry Jones. And you kind of get the feeling that the Steelers and Mike Tomlin are getting tired of each other now at this point.
I, f- I feel like Mike McCarthy has hit the wall of uh, there are things that need to happen over the next few years, but Jerry Jones is expecting it all to happen next year with giving Mike McCarthy none of the ability to make it happen. So that that is part of them splitting ways. Jerry Jones is a guy that tends to lean toward people that are quote loyal to him, and for that reason, I think the next Cowboys head coach is coaching this weekend as in the offensive coordinator for Philadelphia. Kellen Moore, old shovel face, is going to be the next Cowboys head coach. Uh, just something tells me he checks the boxes for what Jerry Jones looks for in a head coach. Somebody that Jerry Jones looks smart by bringing him up as a head coach when Kellen Moore was always going to be a backup in the league, and then turn the offense over to him and got him down this coaching path. I It just smells like Jerry Jones wants a guy like Kellen Moore that would make Jerry look good because he's the one that brought him along.
Yeah, and didn't Kellen Moore play for the Cowboys as
Yeah,
well?
he was the backup,
Yeah,
uh, and then all of a sudden became the offensive coordinator uh, under Jason Garrett. So,
yeah.
uh, but
That's possible. He was one of the more fringe candidates, I think, but can't say that. Um, One that's might be even more out left field than you, David. Um, People kind of forgot about him because he technically signed with the team. But Bill Belichick, he thought he was going to get the Cowboys job. He's like, oh, Mike McCarthy still got a job. Okay, I just go to North Carolina. Yeah. Um,
I
no,
are
but
you are,
then he released
are
him and he's like, aha, I will
Thad,
go to the Cowboys now.
Thad, just for the record, are you talking about Bill Belichick or Ed Orgeron? Because you just sounded like
go
Ed
Tigers.
Orgeron.
Go
You
Tigers.
don't sound like Edwards or like that. Yeah.
I'm
Go
going to
Tigers.
Carolina. All right, all right, all right. Well, that's just one of the uh, coaching moves that has happened since the end of the regular season and moving on over the next month or so. And we'll be keeping an eye on it, and there'll be plenty of movement happening. So stay tuned as we dive into more hirings and firings that take place in front office as well as on coaching staffs as we get further into the end of this year and into the new NFL year. But that's all the time that we have for this evening. We'd like to thank y'all on behalf of Total Sports Talk. Please like and subscribe our videos and just check us out. Every week, we'll be giving you more NFL content. And until next time, we are rounding third and we are headed for home.